Commander Ju Park stood at the observation deck of the flagship Horizon, watching as the 5 human vessels approached Nexus Prime. The massive space station hung like a jewel against the backdrop of stars, home to the Galactic Council that governed hundreds of species across thousands of worlds. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" said Lieutenant Somin Cho, joining her commander at the viewport. "Yes," Park replied, his eyes fixed on the gleaming structure. "Hard to believe we're finally here. Humanity's first official diplomatic mission to Council headquarters." Park was a veteran of Earth's early expansion conflicts, his face bearing the subtle marks of someone who had seen both the worst and best of humanity's push into space. Now, at 45, he led this historic mission. 200 of Earth's best, a careful mix of military personnel and diplomatic experts. "The Council representatives are ready to receive us," said Communications Officer Hyun Mubai over the ship's system. "They're assigning docking bays now." Park nodded. "Tell the fleet to prepare for docking procedures. I want our best face forward." The 5 ships, Horizon, Discovery, Pioneer, Venture, and Enterprise, represented the pinnacle of human engineering. While modest compared to the massive vessels of older galactic civilizations, they showcased humanity's rapid technological advancement since discovering faster-than-light travel just 30 years ago. As the ships eased into their assigned docking bays, Park reviewed the mission objectives one final time. Negotiations for mining rights in the Cygnus asteroid belt were the primary goal, but establishing stronger diplomatic ties with the Council's 17 founding species was equally important. "Commander," said Security Chief Jinho Ryu, approaching with a tablet. "Something feels off about these docking assignments." Park glanced at the screen. "What's the issue?" "They've placed all our ships in the same section of the station. Standard protocol would be to distribute visiting diplomatic fleets across different quadrants for balance and safety." Park frowned. "Could be nothing. Maybe just convenience for their security teams." "Maybe," Ryu said, not sounding convinced. "I've also noticed unusual movement patterns among station personnel near our docking bays." "Keep our security teams on standard alert," Park decided, "but no obvious defensive posturing. We're here as diplomats first." 2 hours later, Park led the primary diplomatic team onto Nexus Prime. The station's interior was a marvel of engineering. Soaring ceilings, gravity-defying architecture, and representatives from dozens of species moving through gleaming corridors. Council Representative Torek, a tall, green-skinned Viridian with 4 arms, met the human delegation at the diplomatic reception chamber. "Commander Park, welcome to Nexus Prime," Sorak said, performing the traditional Viridian greeting. "The Council is honored by humanity's presence." "The honor is ours," Park replied, executing a flawless response gesture his team had practiced for months. What Park couldn't see was the meeting happening simultaneously in a secure chamber deep within the station. 7 representatives from the Council's most powerful species sat around a curved table. "The humans progress too quickly," said Morzak, the Tellurian delegate. "In 30 years, they've achieved what took our species centuries. Their vessels already incorporate technology they've only recently been exposed to," added Vexra, the Saurian representative. "Their adaptability is concerning." High Chancellor Drax, the eldest among them, raised a gray-skinned hand. "We have seen this pattern before. Species that advance too rapidly become destabilizing forces. The Creel, the Vorishk, all eventually threatened galactic stability. The humans haven't shown aggressive tendencies," countered Ilara, the Lyran representative. "Not yet," said Drax, "but their history is filled with conflict. They united their planet only after nearly destroying it 3 times. Do we wait until they have the capability to threaten us?" The vote was taken, 5-2 in favor of what they clinically termed preventative intervention. Meanwhile, Park and his team were being led through a series of increasingly positive meetings. Several minor trade agreements were already being finalized, and the Council representatives seemed surprisingly open to discussing the Cygnus mining rights. "It's going too well," muttered diplomatic advisor Jai Kang as they returned to the horizon for a brief recess. They're giving us everything we ask for with minimal negotiation. Maybe they're just being welcoming, suggested junior diplomat Taedong Nam. Park shared Kang's unease, but kept his concerns private. Something didn't feel right. That evening, as the human delegation prepared for a formal dinner with the council representatives, Ryu burst into Park's quarters. "Commander, we've detected unauthorized access to our ship's engineering systems." Park's expression hardened. "What kind of access?" "Someone's been probing our reactor safeguards. Very sophisticated. Bypassed 3 security layers before our systems caught it. Alert all ships. Full security protocols. I want." Park's communicator chimed with an emergency tone. "Commander, it was Captain Min-Jun Lee from the Discovery. We're detecting unusual power fluctuations in all 5 reactor cores. Systems aren't responding to shutdown commands. Evacuate all ships immediately," Park ordered. "Emergency protocols. Get everyone to the station." Park rushed to the bridge, where chaos had erupted. Engineers worked frantically at terminals while alarm systems blared. "Reactor containment is failing," reported Chief Engineer Yoon Ji-yoon, her fingers flying over controls. "Something's overriding our safety systems. I can't stop it." Park grabbed the station-wide communication system. "This is Commander Park to all Earth personnel. Abandon ships immediately. Repeat, abandon ships." Throughout the 5 vessels, crew members raced toward escape routes. Some made it to the station. Many didn't. 43 minutes after the first alarm, the reactor of the Venture went critical. The explosion tore through the docking bay, setting off a chain reaction that consumed the remaining 4 ships. 200 lives, humanity's brightest, gone. On the station, Park stood with the 37 survivors who had made it off the ships, watching in horror through a viewport as their vessels burned. Council security forces surrounded them, expressions of sympathy on alien faces. "A terrible accident," High Chancellor Drax told Park, his voice solemn. "Reactor instability is a risk all spacefaring species face. The Council extends its deepest condolences." Park said nothing. Behind him, Ryu quietly showed him something on a small device. Security footage smuggled from a sympathetic Lyran engineer. The images showed Council operatives accessing engineering terminals connected to the human ships hours before the accident. 3 days later, a single ship carrying Park and the survivors approached Earth. His message was brief, transmitted ahead of their arrival. This was no accident. This was an act of war. Within hours, Earth's unified government declared a planetary emergency. All humans in Council space were ordered to return immediately. Military forces went on high alert. In a sealed chamber beneath Geneva, Park presented the evidence to Earth's leadership. "They fear us," he concluded. "They fear what we might become." President Sungo Lee stood at the head of the table, his face grim. "Then they should have killed us all." 6 months after the destruction of humanity's diplomatic fleet, Admiral Do-Yeon Kim walked slowly through the hallways of the United Earth Defense Headquarters in Seoul. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his posture rigid with barely contained anger. At 63, he had spent his life believing humanity would find peaceful cooperation among the stars. Now he knew better. The doors to the council chamber slid open. Inside, 24 men and women representing Earth's unified government waited in tense silence. The room was plain and functional. Humanity had more important things to focus on than decorative chambers. Admiral Kim, President Sungo Lee nodded. "We're ready for your presentation." Kim stepped to the center of the room. The holographic display activated, showing the symbol he had chosen for humanity's response. Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. "Operation Prometheus," Kim began, his voice calm despite the fire in his eyes. "A comprehensive military strategy for victory against the Galactic Council." Images appeared in the air. Ship designs, weapon schematics, tactical simulations. The council members leaned forward, faces grim. "The council believes they understand war," Kim told the silent chamber. "They don't. They know skirmishes and border conflicts. Humanity has perfected total war through centuries of blood. We will now teach them the difference. Defense Minister Minji Jiang raised her hand. Admiral, we've all seen the intelligence. The Council controls thousands of worlds. Their military capacity exceeds ours by a factor of at least 50 to 1. How can we possibly hope to challenge them? Kim nodded, having expected this question. Not through conventional means. The moment they destroyed our ships, they showed us they fear our potential. But they made a critical mistake. They didn't understand what they were provoking. He gestured, and the display shifted to historical images, ancient battles, world wars, modern conflicts. Throughout our history, humanity has developed warfare in ways unique among known species. The Council races evolved slowly, taking thousands of years to develop technologies we mastered in decades. Their conflicts were limited, controlled. Ours were total. Kim walked around the table, making eye contact with each member. They expect us to build bigger ships, more powerful weapons, to fight them on their terms. We won't. We'll fight asymmetrically, using every advantage our unique psychology and history gives us. For the next hour, Kim outlined his strategy. The Council members' expressions shifted from doubt to grim determination. When he finished, the room was silent for several long moments. President Lee stood. The floor is open for discussion. This goes beyond warfare, said Science Minister Junho Park. You're talking about transforming our entire civilization. Yes, Kim agreed. Every aspect. Our economy. Our research priorities. Our production capabilities. Everything focused on survival through victory. The civilian cost will be enormous, noted Economic Minister Yoon Joo-han. Kim nodded. Everyone will sacrifice. But the alternative is extinction. The Council has shown their hand. They see us as a threat to be eliminated. After 3 hours of debate, President Lee called for a vote. The result was unanimous. Operation Prometheus is approved, Lee announced. May history forgive us for what we must become. The transformation began immediately. Across Earth and its colonies, civilian shipyards converted to military production. Research facilities that once focused on terraforming now developed weapon systems. Universities fast-tracked students in strategic fields. Recruitment centers opened in every city. At the Kim Aerospace Facility in New Busan, Dr. Jae-hyun led a team converting civilian passenger ships into stealth vessels. She had lost her brother in the Council attack. These hulls need to be completely reconfigured, she told her team, pointing to schematics. The Council's detection systems look for specific energy signatures. We'll make ours invisible by mimicking background radiation patterns. Nearby, workers dismantled luxury cabins to make room for missile bays and electronic warfare systems. What had once been a cruise liner would soon become a ghost ship capable of slipping past the most advanced alien detection grids. Similar scenes played out across human space. Mining ships became troop carriers. Research vessels transformed into electronic warfare platforms. Terraforming equipment was repurposed for planetary defense systems. On Luna Base, Admiral Kim met with Commander Joo Park, one of the few survivors of the Council attack. Park had been promoted and now led the newly formed Special Tactics Division. Your experiences give you unique insight, Kim told him as they reviewed training exercises. You've seen their arrogance firsthand. Park nodded, his eyes harder than Kim remembered from before the attack. They think we'll be predictable, that we'll follow their rules of engagement. And we won't, Kim confirmed. Your teams will be our edge. Small, fast, unconventional. While they look for our fleets, your people will already be inside their systems. Park gestured to the soldiers training in the low-gravity chamber below them. Men and women practicing moving in alien environments, using captured Council technology, learning alien languages and customs. They'll be ready, Admiral. We all will. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Galactic Council received reports of Earth's activities with dismissive amusement. High Chancellor Drax reviewed the intelligence briefing in his private chambers on Nexus Prime. The document detailed increased human military production, troop movements, and resource allocation. "They're preparing for war," noted his aide, a young Viridian named Sorak. Drax made a dismissive gesture with one of his four hands. "Let them prepare. Their entire industrial capacity doesn't equal that of even a minor council member." "Some suggest we should strike now," Sorak said cautiously, "before they can build up further." "Unnecessary," Drax replied. "Our intelligence indicates they possess neither the technology nor resources to challenge even a single council member species, let alone our collective might." Sorak wasn't convinced. The humans adapt quickly. Several analysts have noted unusual patterns in their preparations. What patterns? They're not building capital ships or planetary defense systems in the numbers we'd expect. Much of their activity remains unclear. Drax waved away the concern. "They're disorganized, emotional. The attack on their diplomatic fleet was regrettable but necessary. They'll bluster and threaten, but ultimately they'll accept their place." In the Council's military headquarters, General Kraz of the Saurian Defense Force shared Drax's confidence. He studied the holographic display showing human space, a tiny collection of stars compared to the vast territories controlled by Council races. "Their largest warships are half the size of our medium cruisers," he told his staff. "Their weapons technology lags decades behind ours. Their FTL drives are primitive. This threat is being overblown." Only Ilara, the Lyran representative who had voted against the attack on the human fleet, felt uneasy. In her private communications with Lyran intelligence, she expressed concerns that were largely ignored. "We've underestimated them before," she wrote. "Their advancement curve is unlike anything we've seen, and they've gone quiet in too many sectors. I fear we've awakened something we don't understand." Back on Earth, Admiral Kim stood before the completed prototype of humanity's newest weapon, a device that would introduce the Council to a concept humans had refined over centuries: asymmetric warfare. "Is it ready?" he asked the chief engineer. "Yes, Admiral. First deployment can begin whenever you give the order." Kim nodded, studying the unassuming device. It didn't look like a weapon that could change the course of a war. But then, the most effective weapons rarely did. "Begin production immediately. Operation Prometheus enters Phase 1 in 30 days. As Kim left the facility, he looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, the Council continued their normal activities, confident in their superiority, dismissive of the human threat. "They think they've seen humanity at war," he murmured. "They haven't seen anything yet." High Chancellor Drax was enjoying his morning meal when his personal communicator emitted an urgent signal. He frowned. Interruptions during the first meal were considered highly improper in Viridian culture. Whatever this was, it had better be important. "Yes," he answered, not bothering to hide his irritation. "Chancellor, you need to come to the Central Command immediately," said the voice of General Kraz, the Saurian military leader. Something in the general's usually confident tone made Drax sit up straight. "What's happened?" "The encryption networks are down. All of them." 30 minutes later, Drax stood in the massive central command chamber of Nexus Prime, watching as technicians frantically worked at terminals. The room was filled with the highest-ranking officials from across the Council species, their faces showing various expressions of shock, anger, and fear. "How is this possible?" Drax demanded. The quantum encryption was supposed to be unbreakable. Chief Technology Officer Miller, a Centaurian with 6 limbs and a reputation for brilliance, shook her head in disbelief. "It wasn't broken, Chancellor. It was bypassed. Someone found a way to access the network without triggering the security protocols." "The humans?" General Kraz asked, his scaled face twisted in disbelief. "We can't confirm that yet, but—" Miller was interrupted by another alarm. A junior officer hurried forward. "Sir, classified information is being broadcast across public channels. Military deployments, fleet movements, trade agreements, everything. Drax felt a cold sensation in his stomachs. "Shut it down." "We're trying, sir, but the systems won't respond to commands." On the main display, information continued to flow. Secret military installations, hidden trade deals, even private communications between council members that revealed years of deception and political maneuvering. "This will cause chaos," whispered Ilara, the Lyran representative who had previously warned against underestimating the humans. She was right. Within hours, protests erupted on 17 worlds as citizens discovered how their governments had been manipulating economies and hiding resources. The Krell Confederation, a major council ally, publicly denounced the revealed secret military treaty that would have used their territory as a buffer zone in future conflicts. Financial markets across council space plummeted. 3 major trading houses declared bankruptcy before midday. Centuries-old alliances began to fracture as previously hidden information came to light. But this was only the beginning. On the Saurian military base of Varric 3, Commander Tisk was overseeing emergency security protocols when his sensor officer called out in alarm. "Sir, unknown objects in orbit." "How many?" Tisk demanded, moving to the display. "At least 50, sir. Small. No known configuration. They appeared suddenly. Our early warning systems didn't detect their approach." Tisk stared at the display in disbelief. The objects were barely larger than personal shuttles, but their movement patterns were unlike anything he'd seen before. They maintained perfect formation while moving at speeds that should have been impossible for vessels that size. "Raise shields. Alert the defense fleet." Before the orders could be carried out, the unknown vessels opened fire, not with conventional weapons, but with precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses that disabled communications and defense systems without causing physical damage. Then came the second wave. Larger drones dropped from the mysterious vessels, descending through the atmosphere with impossible precision. They targeted command centers, power facilities, and communications arrays. Within minutes, the most secure military installation in the sector was blind, deaf, and powerless. Similar scenes played out across council space. 17 key military installations were hit simultaneously. None saw their attackers coming. None were able to mount an effective defense. And in every case, the targets were carefully chosen. Command and control centers rather than population areas. Military infrastructure rather than civilian. This was not random violence. This was strategic. In the Council Emergency Chamber, High Chancellor Drax faced the grim reality of their situation. "The humans?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. General Kraz nodded. "Analysis confirms the technology signatures. These are human-designed systems, though far more advanced than our intelligence suggested they possessed. How did they get past our detection grids? We don't know. Their vessels seem to use some form of stealth technology that makes them appear as background radiation." Drax's mind raced. How had the humans advanced so quickly? Their ships had been primitive just a year ago. And how had they coordinated attacks across such vast distances when their FTL capabilities were supposedly limited? "Send the response fleets," he ordered. "All of them. Target their home system. Let's end this before it goes any further." 4 massive council battle groups, comprising over 300 capital ships and thousands of support vessels, converged on human space. It was the largest military force assembled in council history, enough firepower to reduce dozens of worlds to molten rock. Admiral Kyung-E-Oh watched from the bridge of the UES Shadow as the council fleets arrived in Earth's solar system. Her vessel was hidden in the debris field of what had once been a mining facility in the outer system, its advanced stealth systems making it virtually invisible. "They brought everything, just as predicted," noted her executive officer, Commander Daehyun Kang. Admiral Oh nodded. "Send the confirmation to command. Operation Ghost System is successful." Throughout human space, similar scenes played out. Small, stealth human vessels watched as the mighty council fleets searched increasingly empty systems. They found abandoned colonies, evacuated mining facilities, and automated defense systems that offered token resistance before falling silent. What they didn't find was Earth's fleet, or Earth's population. 3 weeks into the Council's offensive, General Kraz stood before a furious High Chancellor Drax. "What do you mean, we can't find them?" Drax demanded. "An entire species doesn't simply disappear." Kraz struggled to maintain his composure. "The human colonies are empty, evacuated. Their defense fleet isn't engaging our forces. We've secured their known territories. But what? But we're encountering problems with our supply lines." This was an understatement. Throughout Council space, supply convoys were vanishing. Critical shipments failed to reach their destinations. Fuel depots reported mysterious losses. And everywhere, Council military leaders were receiving the same message. This is what real war looks like. On the human vessel Phantom, Captain Jin Su-ba led a small team on a mission that would have been considered impossible 6 months earlier. They had spent 3 weeks tracking a Council supply convoy carrying critical reactor components for the Saurian fleet. "Target locked," reported his weapons officer. "We have clean shots on all 3 escort vessels." Bai nodded. "Take them out simultaneously. No survivors, no distress calls." The Phantom, along with 2 sister ships, fired specialized weapons designed to overwhelm Saurian shields with minimal energy signatures. The escort vessels never had a chance to return fire. Escorts neutralized, moving to secure the transport. Unlike most military commanders, Bai had never served in a traditional navy. Before the Council attack, he had been part of Earth's anti-piracy forces, specializing in boarding actions and ship seizures. Now those skills were being put to use in a very different kind of war. "Standard capture procedure," he ordered as the Phantom maneuvered alongside the much larger transport vessel. "I want those components intact." 2 hours later, the transport's crew was secured in escape pods programmed to reach the nearest Council outpost. But only after a 3-day delay, the ship's cargo was transferred to the human vessels. Then, rather than destroying the transport, Bai's team left it drifting. Its systems intact but locked with encryption that would take Council experts weeks to break. "Why leave it intact?" asked a junior officer as they prepared to depart. "Because they'll waste resources trying to recover it," Bai explained. "And because every ship they find like this increases their fear of what they can't see." Similar operations were happening throughout Council space. Small human vessels using advanced stealth technology struck at supply lines, communication relays, and sensor arrays. They appeared from nowhere, struck with precision, and vanished before response forces could arrive. This wasn't the war the Council had expected. They had prepared for massive fleet engagements, planetary bombardments, and heroic last stands. Instead, they got an invisible enemy that refused to face them directly, that studied their patterns and exploited their weaknesses, that targeted infrastructure rather than military assets. An enemy that understood that war wasn't about destroying your opponent's ships. It was about destroying their ability to fight. 6 months after humanity's first strike, Council military leaders faced an uncomfortable truth. They were losing a war against an enemy they couldn't find, using tactics they didn't understand, with technology they had believed impossible. And somewhere in the vastness of space, Admiral Do-Yun Kim watched the reports come in and prepared for Phase 2. "They wanted war," he told his staff as they reviewed their progress. "We're giving them war, just not the kind they expected." Dr. Minja Lee wiped sweat from her forehead as she looked through the observation window. On the other side, the damaged frigate UES Indomitable floated in the massive repair dock. The ship had barely escaped a Council ambush 3 days ago, limping back to the hidden human base with most of its port side missing and its crew surviving on emergency life support. By traditional repair estimates, the Indomitable would be out of commission for at least 6 months. But not today. "Begin Lazarus Protocol," Lee ordered. Her team activated the system. From deployment tubes around the dock, Clouds of microscopic machines poured forth, surrounding the damaged vessel like a silver mist. These nanites, each smaller than a human cell, but containing sophisticated programming, began to work. They stripped usable material from the wreckage. They harvested raw materials from containers positioned around the dock. They built upon the ship's remaining structure, reconstructing hull plates, power conduits, internal systems, all according to the vessel's original specifications. Commander Heijin Choi, the Indomitable's captain, stood beside Lee, watching in amazement as his ship was reborn before his eyes. "How long?" he asked. 8 hours for full combat readiness," Lee replied. "The reactor will need another 4 hours for optimal calibration." Choi shook his head in disbelief. This would have taken the council months. Lee allowed herself a small smile. "That's our advantage. They develop technology incrementally over millennia. We compress technological evolution into decades." Throughout the observation room, engineers and scientists monitored the process. The Lazarus Protocol represented the culmination of research that had begun decades before humanity reached the stars, research into self-replicating machines, and matter manipulation that had once been considered purely theoretical. Dr. Lee called one of her assistants. "Priority message from Admiral Kim." Lee stepped away to take the communication. Admiral Kim's holographic image appeared, his expression serious but satisfied. "The Council just discovered our false shipyard in the Procyon system," he reported. "They committed significant resources to destroy it." "How many did we lose?" Lee asked. "None. We had already evacuated, but they believe they destroyed 12 vessels under construction." Lee nodded. "While we repair 23 here." Kim's image smiled. "Exactly. Their intelligence continues to lag behind our actual capabilities. Is the Indomitable on schedule?" "Yes, Admiral. Ready for redeployment tomorrow." "Good, because Captain Kang is ready to demonstrate the quantum shields. I want the Indomitable to join the test group." After finishing the call, Lee returned to the window. The nanite swarm had already reconstructed nearly 40% of the damaged areas. Workers inside wore specially designed suits that protected them from accidental nanite exposure, while allowing them to guide the microscopic machines for more complex repairs. This was humanity's response to being outgunned, finding ways to recover from damage faster than the enemy could inflict it. Across the facility, in a heavily shielded testing chamber, Captain Heijin Kang prepared for a demonstration that would change the nature of space combat. His vessel, the destroyer UES Defiant, had been specially modified with technology that the Council had theorized, but never successfully implemented. "Quantum displacement shields at 60%, reported his chief engineer, "ready for demonstration firing." Kang nodded to the observation team behind a reinforced view screen. "Begin targeting sequence." Outside the ship, a battery of Council-equivalent weapons locked onto the Defiant. These were the same specifications as those used by Saurian battlecruisers, the most powerful directed energy weapons currently deployed in Council fleets. "All weapons locked," confirmed the weapons officer controlling the test battery. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. Brilliant beams of concentrated energy lashed out, striking the Defiant directly. But instead of impacting the hull, the energy seemed to bend around the vessel, disappearing into what looked like tiny tears in space itself. "Quantum displacement holding," reported the engineer. "Shields absorbing 97% of impact energy, remaining 3% being diverted to subspace." Kang allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Conventional shields tried to block incoming energy, a losing battle against sufficiently powerful weapons. Quantum displacement shields instead shifted the energy into subspace, effectively removing it from normal spacetime. "Increase weapons power by 30%, he ordered. Again the weapons fired, now at levels that would cripple even the largest Council vessels. Again the quantum shields held. "This changes everything," said Admiral Jun So-yoon, who had been observing the test. "With these shields, even our smaller vessels can stand against their capital ships." Kang nodded. The technology was always theoretically possible. The Council simply lacked the innovation to make it practical. And the courage to test it, added Yoon. Their scientific methodologies are too conservative. They won't implement technologies until they're proven through decades of incremental testing. Their caution is our opportunity, Kang replied. But humanity's most effective weapon wasn't nanite repair systems or advanced shield technology. It was understanding the psychology of their enemies. In a nondescript facility on Luna, Commander Minji Hong led the Psychological Operations Division. Her background wasn't in traditional military strategy, but in xenoanthropology, the study of alien cultures and psychology. The Council isn't a monolith, she explained to her team as they prepared their most ambitious operation yet. It's 17 species with different evolutionary histories, different social structures, different fears. For centuries, they've maintained an illusion of unity. We're going to shatter that illusion. The room was filled with specialists in alien languages, cultures, and communication systems. They had spent months studying on Centaurian colonies, financial records showing centuries of Tellurian manipulation of currency values suddenly became public. On 17 worlds simultaneously, the carefully constructed narrative of Council unity began to crumble under the weight of suppressed truths. The beauty of this approach, Hong explained to Admiral Kim during a progress briefing, is that we're not creating division. We're just revealing divisions that already existed. Kim nodded. And since many Council species are telepathic or empathic, they have no defense against emotional contagion once doubt takes root. That was proving to be the Council's greatest vulnerability. Species that evolved with telepathic abilities had never needed to develop psychological defenses against information warfare. Emotions spread through their populations like wildfire, amplified by their natural connections. Fear, doubt, suspicion, resentment. Emotions that humans had learned to manage through centuries of media exposure hit unprepared alien minds with devastating effect. 3 months after Hong's operation began, the first major crack appeared in the Council's unity. The Lyran Confederation, long uncomfortable with the attack on humanity, formally withdrew from the Council's military alliance. We cannot continue to support actions based on fear rather than evidence, announced the Lyran Prime Minister. The human response, while concerning, was provoked by our aggression. 2 weeks later, the Centaurians demanded the resignation of 3 Tellurian representatives from the Economic Council, citing centuries of systemic exploitation. By the 6th month, open conflicts had erupted between Viridian and Saurian forces over the disputed Krell sector. High Chancellor Drax, watching his carefully maintained political order collapse, finally recognized the true nature of the threat. This wasn't just a military conflict. This was an attack on the very foundations of Council society, using the Council's own secrets as weapons. They'd studied us, he admitted to his inner circle. They identified our weaknesses and exploited them with surgical precision. Everything we've done has played into their strategy. What do we do? Asked Thorak, his aide. Drax stared at the reports of yet another alliance fracturing, another conflict erupting between former allies. We've lost, he said simply, not to human weapons, but to human understanding. They've beaten us at a game we didn't even know we were playing. 1 year after humanity's first strike, the mighty Galactic Council, an institution that had stood for 3,000 years, existed in name only. Former allies turned against each other. Trade networks collapsed, and human vessels, now equipped with technologies the Council had believed impossible, moved freely through systems once thought impregnable. All because humanity had recognized something the Council had not. That true warfare isn't just about destroying your enemy's capacity to fight. It's about destroying their will to fight. Admiral Doyen, Kim stood motionless on the observation deck of the UES Retribution. Through the massive viewport, the once magnificent Nexus Prime hung against the backdrop of stars. The station that had been the center of galactic governance for 3,000 years now displayed a continuous surrender signal, its lights dimmed, Its defenses offline. It doesn't look like much anymore, said Commander Ju Park, who had come to stand beside him. The commander's face bore new scars, both physical and emotional, from the year of conflict. No, Kim agreed quietly. It doesn't. A year ago, Kim had presented Operation Prometheus to Earth's leadership, promising them victory against an enemy that outgunned humanity by orders of magnitude. Many had doubted. Some had called it suicide. But Kim had understood something the Council never grasped. That warfare was about more than ships and weapons. It was about will, innovation, and understanding your enemy better than they understood themselves. "Sir, the Council representatives are ready to receive us," reported Communications Officer Suvin Choi. Kim nodded. "Inform the delegation. We depart in 30 minutes." As the bridge crew prepared for the historic meeting, Kim thought about the cost of this victory. Humanity had lost colonies, resources, and lives. They had transformed their civilization into a war machine. The scars would take generations to heal. Was it worth it? Park asked softly, seeming to read his thoughts. Kim considered the question carefully. "They left us no choice. Remember what they did to your fleet. 200 of our best. They believed we would accept their dominance or face extinction. Instead, they learned what human determination really means," Park said. 90 minutes later, Kim led the human delegation through the corridors of Nexus Prime. The station felt hollow now, its grand chambers eerily quiet. Most of the administrative staff had evacuated weeks ago as the Council's authority crumbled. In the Great Chamber, where representatives from 17 species had once governed the galaxy, only 7 figures awaited them. High Chancellor Drax, looking much older than he had a year ago, stood at the center. "Admiral Kim," Drax said, performing a formal Viridian greeting. "The Council welcomes humanity's representatives." Kim did not return the greeting. "This is not a diplomatic meeting, Chancellor. This is a surrender negotiation." Drax's forehands trembled slightly. "We prefer to call it a peace conference." "Call it what you wish," Kim replied. "The terms remain non-negotiable." Captain Min Ha-yoon, who had served as a diplomat before the war, stepped forward with a datapad. "The terms of surrender are as follows. First, the immediate dissolution of the current Galactic Council structure. Second, a war crimes tribunal for those who orchestrated the attack on our diplomatic fleet. Third, the establishment of a new galactic confederation based on principles of equality rather than hierarchy." Drax and the other council representatives listened in silence as Yoon outlined 27 specific conditions. Some involved territorial concessions. Others required technological exchange. All were designed to ensure that no species could again dominate others through force or manipulation. When Yoon finished, Drax spoke softly. "These terms would end 3,000 years of galactic order." "Your order was built on subjugation and fear," Kim replied. "It ended the moment you decided our species didn't deserve to exist as equals." Ilara, the Lyran representative who had opposed the original attack on humanity, stepped forward. "The terms are harsh but fair. We brought this upon ourselves when we chose fear over cooperation." One by one, the remaining council representatives indicated their acceptance. When the last had given consent, Kim nodded to Yoon, who activated the formal surrender protocols. Throughout the station, and across thousands of worlds, the announcement went out. The Galactic Council had fallen. A new era was beginning. Later, as the human delegation prepared to return to their ship, Kim stood alone in the observation lounge. The view from here showed not just Nexus Prime but the surrounding space, now filled with hundreds of vessels from dozens of species. Some were human. Many were from former Council worlds. All had come to witness the birth of something new. "Admiral," said a voice behind him. Kim turned to see High Chancellor Drax. "Chancellor," Kim acknowledged. "I wanted to ask you something," Drax said, his voice lacking its former authority. "You could have destroyed us completely. Your tactics, your technology, you had us at your mercy. Why didn't you?" Kim considered the question. "Because that was never our goal. We didn't want this war. We asked for partnership. You chose extermination. We chose survival. And now we all move forward together, but as equals. Drax seemed to age before Kim's eyes. I fear many of my people will not adapt easily to this new reality. They will learn, Kim said simply. As we all must. 3 days later, the War Crimes Tribunal began. Unlike traditional council justice, which was conducted in secret, these proceedings were broadcast throughout known space. Every species, every world, every citizen could witness as evidence was presented against those who had orchestrated the attack on humanity's diplomatic fleet. Admiral Kim testified about Operation Prometheus, explaining how humanity had transformed itself to meet an existential threat. Dr. Minja Lee detailed the technological innovations that had given humanity its edge. Commander Minji Hong explained the psychological warfare that had fractured the council from within. Most devastating was the testimony of Commander Ju Park, who described watching his comrades die in an attack disguised as an accident. They believed they were coming in peace, Park told the tribunal, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. They never knew they were the first casualties in what would become humanity's most decisive victory. After 2 weeks of testimony, the tribunal reached its verdict. Those directly responsible for the attack were sentenced to life imprisonment. Those who had approved the plan were removed from positions of authority permanently. But there was no mass punishment, no collective penalty for council species. This Kim had insisted upon. Justice would be specific and proportional, another departure from council traditions. 6 months later, representatives from 37 species gathered on Earth for the formal establishment of the Galactic Confederation. Unlike the hierarchical council, this new organization was built on principles of equality, transparency, and mutual defense. Kim, now serving as Earth's representative to the Confederation, watched as species that had been enemies a year earlier signed treaties of cooperation and exchange. Former council worlds, freed from centuries of dominance, brought unique perspectives and technologies to the table. "We've created something remarkable," said Dr. Jae-Hyun, who stood beside him at the ceremony. "Not just peace, but a genuine partnership among equals." Kim nodded. "Out of necessity, we became warriors, but that was never our true nature. Humans are builders, explorers, creators. Now we can return to that path, but wiser than before." After the ceremony, Kim visited the memorial that had been erected in Seoul to honor the 200 lives lost in the council's attack. The simple stone monument stood in a quiet garden, water flowing gently around its base. Carved into its surface were the names of every person who had died aboard those 5 ships. Below the names was a simple inscription that Park had suggested, words that had become famous throughout human space and beyond. They believed they were coming in peace. They never knew they were the first casualties in humanity's most decisive victory. Kim placed his hand on the cool stone, feeling the weight of all that had happened since that day. The transformation of humanity. The fall of the council. The birth of something new. "We remembered," he said quietly to the names carved in stone, "and we made sure the galaxy would never forget." As Kim turned to leave, he saw a group of alien visitors approaching the memorial, representatives from former council worlds who had come to pay their respects. Among them was Ilara, the Leyran who had opposed the attack from the beginning. "Admiral Kim," she said, performing a traditional human bow, "we came to honor those who died." "Thank you," Kim replied. "Their sacrifice changed the galaxy." "For the better," Ilara added, "though the path was harder than it needed to be." Kim nodded in agreement. The war had been costly for all sides, but from its ashes had risen something that might endure, a true community of species united not by force but by choice. As the sun set over Seoul, casting long shadows across the memorial garden, Kim thought about the future that now lay open before them all. Not just survival, but prosperity. Not just peace, but partnership. The stars, which had briefly become battlefields, once again beckoned as frontiers of discovery.